Partner Week. I am Refilwe Muleane, the Deputy Director, International Academic Partnerships at the Center for Global Engagement. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our Acting Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Research, Innovation and Engagement, Professor Sampson Mashele. Allow me to quickly introduce him before he will take over the program with a short welcome and contextualization of the program. Colleagues, you may note our Vice-Chancellor, due to executive commitments, will be joining us at 1 o'clock today to do the official welcome. With that said, allow me to just give a summary of who Prof. Mashele is. Professor Mashele is currently the Acting DVC Research, Innovation and Engagement. He is the Wessel Director for the Drug Discovery Unit at CUT. His quest to quench his academic thirst led him to Medical University of South Africa, previously known as Madunsa, where he excelled in medical sciences and was given a scholarship sponsored by USAID to do part of his doctorate research at University of Michigan in the US. He was also a visiting lecturer at University of Michigan. After many years teaching in South Africa, he went overseas as a professor at the Medical University. He used his South African perspective, problem-based learning, in helping to integrate modules in medicine, both vertically and horizontally. He is serving on editorial boards of many international journals as a panel member in research foundations. He has won many awards as the best facilitator several times in South Africa and overseas. He has supervised many students and published extensively in high impact factor journals. His research interest is in discovering novel anti-cancer drugs. He is collaborating with universities overseas, the CSIR, and the National Cancer Institute, South Africa, USA. With that said, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Professor Sampson Mashele to give us contextualization and an informal welcome this morning. Prof, over to you. Prof, you are muted.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Prof.
Thank you very much, colleagues. And thank you very much, Program Director. And of course, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you all in the Family Week series, actually the one that we are on now, that actually speaks to internationalization, decolonization, and Africanization. So it's quite a mouthful. So we are going to unpack this, and we hope you are going to enjoy this particular discussion as we continue with this program. So as CUT, I would like to really say thank you very much and welcome you all, albeit virtually. Now, CUT is a university of technology, and we're saying that as CUT by 2030, if you're looking at our Vision 2030, we want to be the leading university of technology, shaping the future through innovation. Not just a leading university of technology, but leading African university of technology, shaping the future through innovation. And for us to be able to do that, we need to really internationalize and making sure that we raise the profile of CUT. And of course, discussions like this would actually go a long way to making sure that we actually do raise the profile of CUT. Now, allow me, a program director, to start by saying, to center otherness or otherness is to accept that no single voice speaks for us all. This was basically a quote by Carol Zuma Dennis in 2018. Now, I'm saying this because when you look at the debate around decolonization in higher education, it's a topical one and sometimes controversial, engaging authors of different disciplines and driving a multi-layered discourse involving many stakeholders around the world. Furthermore, the concept of decolonization has different meaning to different people in different contexts, with dimensions that encapsulate political, economic, cultural, material, and epistemic dimensions. Others view colonization, particularly in education, as having multiple characteristics. The political, philosophical, and cultural dimensions of the term mean that it is enacted in many disciplines and teaching learning spaces, and more significantly belies a moral responsibility, which I may argue educators and learners are not always aware of it. So people have got different meanings of what we mean, maybe even by decolonization, others even by internationalization, Africanization, and so forth. So we're hoping this discussion will help us to unpack this and, of course, have a way forward on some of these things. Now, decolonization can be broadly understood as an umbrella term for diverse efforts to resist the distinct but intertwined processes of colonization and racialization, to enact transformation and redress in reference to the historical and ongoing effects of these processes. And of course, to create and keep alive modes of knowing, modes of being. And this is what basically, from my understanding, what we mean by decolonization. We therefore acknowledge the difficulty of language from a disciplinary perspective, which silos and restricts our understanding, and also as a cultural challenge that distorts meaning and sense-making. The challenge of understanding, sense-making, conceptualization, and critiquing is complicated by a shorthand use of common words such as the one we've referred to: colonization, decolonization, internationalization, capitalism, and so forth. Such words have taken a multi-layered meaning with profound symbolic gestures which need to be explained and re-examined. Now, when you go to literature to look at some of these terms, you'll see that really things are starting to shift. For example, one author, Knight, when discussing this concept of internationalization, he says something very interesting. He says, "We could have forecasted that internationalization would transform from what has been traditionally considered a process based on values of cooperation, partnership, exchange, mutual benefits, and capacity building to one that is increasingly characterized by competition, commercialization, self-interest, and status building." And this is very true, because yes, this is how we understood internationalization, but today things are moving. The ground is actually moving when we speak about internationalization. And of course, in some cases, even when people want to collaborate with you, they would look you up, your ranking, things like that, and so forth, whether it's of their best interest maybe to start to maybe collaborate with you. So it's about status at the end of the day, and not necessarily just about cooperation and partnership. Now, in this complex mechanism of political and economic influence on higher education, leading to commercialization and massification of the academy, such transformations have shifted the meaning of concepts, you see. And that's why this discussion today would be very much meaningful as we try to look to the different ways that we can be able to do things as we move forward. Now, in a recently edited edition of the groundbreaking book on ideology and the curriculum, one author made a particularly poignant argument. He suggests that education is society's tool to create, recreate, and maintain social stratifications. For example, schools legitimize both the inclusion and exclusion of cultural values. The cultural values of the dominant groups find space in the school curriculum, whilst those of the marginalized communities are effectively excluded. So you can see that, yes, it is true what this author actually says about schools and so forth. A major criticism of the performance of our education system is that graduates from universities now are not industry ready, and we've heard this before. So by producing industry ready graduates, universities become powerful sources for the reproduction of labor, which perpetuates and reproduces the values, attitudes, and behaviors necessary to maintain the status quo. Really does, to give you an example, if you think about it, Rarely does the training of doctors veer into the study of traditional medicine, which have been at the heart of the health and survival of indigenous communities for millennia. So nothing of that sort has been covered maybe in medical schools and so forth. So you can see that really that's why people are really even calling for some of these things to take place, like decolonization, and making sure that really we incorporate the knowledge from different societies as we move forward to try and make the society inclusive and to really recognize others. Now, since then decolonization of higher education has become a major ideological lens through which higher education in South Africa have been meant to be transformed. But of course, the jury is still out there, whether 6 years or so down the line, higher education in the country has been or is being decolonized. I think we can still, some would say we still have a long way to go, and some would also have different views when it actually comes to that. So basically then, as we move forward, you can also maybe look at what is happening in higher education and maybe also the reason for the slow progress of maybe transformation and also decolonization, but maybe be also a lack of strategic prioritization of the idea at both the systemic and institutional levels. And of course, a multiplicity of understanding about the ideology, which could lead to conceptual paralysis, which is what we basically see in some cases, because some do not even know how to then incorporate this indigenous knowledge in the curriculum, whether they just have to add, and others would view that as just adding more in the curriculum, making things even maybe more difficult for students and so forth. So these kinds of debate, especially the ones that we're having now, would actually assist us in making sure that we do get to start understanding really these concepts as we go forward: decolonization, Africanization, and of course, internationalization. As I said, the ground have shifted when it comes to that. And because of the different views about that, no one actually speaks for maybe for us, as I started by saying, to center otherness, is to accept that no single voice actually speaks for us all. So at CUT, we are very much excited to host this discussion, and we're looking forward for the discussion. And so as we move forward, as we've said, as an institution, we want to be the leading, not just UOT, but an African university of technology, doing things from the African perspective, but making sure that at the end of the day, we internationalize and making sure that we drive the future through innovation. So looking forward, colleagues, then to the discussion. And of course, I would like to thank you very much for joining this platform. Thank you very much. And back to you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Prof. You have really contextualized the program and giving us a lot of food for thought. I've made some few notes, and we will wrap up at the end. I see a hand from Stone. Is there something you want to say? Oh, okay. Colleagues, please allow me to introduce our keynote for the day. Her name is Professor Lynette Jacobs. Is Prof ready to go on while she's preparing us herself? I will read her bio, and then we'll just give her a 2-minute transition through a video that showcases CUT facilities. Our program today does focus on internationalization, Africanization, and decolonization, the melting pot of higher education. We are also going to take pride to show you some of our facilities at CUT and what we represent on behalf of the Center for Global Engagement. Thank you for being part of our program, and allow me to introduce Professor Lynette Jacobs. Professor Lynette Jacobs is a comparative and international education scholar, specifically focusing on external barriers to inclusive education opportunities. She leads the research portfolio of the Office for International Affairs at the University of the Free State, South Africa. She is an NRF-rated researcher who has published extensively in journals, books, and conference proceedings over the last 15 years. Professor Jacobs is an experienced postgraduate supervisor who has successfully supervised 11 PhD and 20 research master's students to completion. Many of these were international students, including from China, Ethiopia, the US, Lesotho, and Zimbabwe. Professor Jacobs is working on different projects related to capacity building that focus on matter relating to internationalization, decolonization, higher education. She is, for instance, currently in a working group leader of the iKudu project, an EU co-funded project focusing on collaborative online international learning, and the ICAN project, a Pan-Africa project where students' voices and cultures are amplified through storytelling. Her presence in the international academy also focuses in non-centered geopolitical spaces is evident. To cite a few, she did the keynote presentation, Education Provision for Everyone, comparing perspectives from around the world, at the 2016 annual Bulgarian Comparative Education Society Conference in Sofia, Bulgaria. She did a plenary presentation as part of the panel on building right-based education systems in countries in transition at the 2018 ATEE conference in Białystok, Poland. In 2020, she was a panelist in a plenary panel discussion on sustainable development and education hosted by University of Denver. And in 2022, she was a keynote at the Research Methodology Conference hosted by Coventry University and the London Institute for Social Sciences, with a presentation titled Authentically Journeying Research with Yourself and Others. She serves on editorial boards of Scopus, listed journal Perspectives in Education, and guest editor to two special editions of the journal, Perspective of Education 2021, Volume 29, 1, and regularly guest lecturer at institutes other than her own. It gives me great pleasure and an honor to welcome Professor Lynette Jacobs as our keynote address for a note titled Contrasts and Contexts of Internationalization, Africanization, and Decolonization as a Melting Pot for Higher Education. Professor Lynette, I am one in awe of the work that you are doing and truly honored to welcome you and give you the space to give us our keynote for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rufilwe, and thank you to all the CUT colleagues who invited me. Good afternoon also to our very distinguished guest here and the acting rector of CUT. I had a hysterical morning with my Zoom license not connecting to the CUT Zoom. So I'm presenting from a friend's computer. Colleagues, my safe space is indeed in comparative and international education, and that is my starting point for the conversation today. See, now the mouse is not working for me. There you go. Right, so comparative and international education is my safe space. It's what I studied, it's what I do. Therefore, I thought to start by sharing some stories about comparative and international education and where it started for us as internationalization scholars and practitioners to perhaps consider where we are on this trajectory. So started, and I think it will sound very familiar, particularly also for those of you who just returned from Spain, is that for a very long time, education was seen through the eyes of travelers. The oldest written account was of the Greek author Xenophon, who wrote of the Persian king Cyrus and compared Greek and Persian ways of raising children. It's not something that has been left behind. More recently, a book by Amy Chua compared American and Chinese ways of raising children. It's anecdotal, it's non-scientific, but it is very human to compare when we go into another space, what we do with what others do. It has developed into a phase of education borrowing, and we will also recognize that, where government officials look at other universities or education systems, including higher education systems, and just borrow from them without considering context. It also happened, of course, when Western and Northern nation states moved into other regions and colonized the regions and took with them their education systems. I mean, there's lots written about the nature of higher education and how it actually came largely from Western thinking. Yet again, it's mostly non-scientific, and it does not take context, a very important issue, into account. And as South Africans, we can identify how outcomes-based education was just imposed on us by our own government. And we just had to, in school education, take up outcomes-based education without taking into account realities and context in South Africa. So then comparative education moved into a phase of international cooperation. And once again, you should recognize this. International organizations came to the fore. UNESCO, very familiar, but there are others as well. We do know about the Institute of Education at the University of London that has existed since 1930. We know about the comparative studies, the TIMS, the PIRLS, also PISA, that we constantly hear about when we talk about our school education and how ill-prepared our kids are for the world of work and for higher education as well. So it's not to say that context is not taken into account. For instance, PIRLS translate the test into the mother tongue of the learners. Yet it's not contextualized beyond that. It led to an understanding, and for me this is very important, that we need to understand any national education system, including the higher education systems of a country, within the contextual forces in society. That includes the geography, the demography, the social systems, the economy, the political system, religious and philosophical structures, language, culture, and I can continue. So unless we recognize that who we are as higher education and as education across the spectrum is influenced and shaped by our context, we cannot start to look at other education systems and specifically also how internationalization happens in other parts of the world, in our own world. It moved into a phase of social sciences, and it sounds very fantastic if I look at that, but not so much, because that is when the belief started to develop that education can solve everything. And I mean, it's something that we hear in the internationalization discourse continually. Brzezinski described it as follows. He said, when somebody wants to do something with peace, he demands peace education. When a person wants to reduce the number of traffic accidents, let's take traffic education, human rights education, and so on and so on and so on, believing that education is supposed to solve all problems. Together with that came the worldwide education expansion. For instance, in 1950, only 5% of populations entered higher education. By 2010, it expanded to 30% because everybody had this expectation that if you have an education, it will open doors for you. If you have an education, it will solve problems. You will get a job, etc. Indeed, it's a bit of a disillusionment because education did not produce the predicted societal benefits. It led to schooled unemployment. And I'm sure you all are very aware of the high unemployment rate in South Africa, also for graduates of our institutions. During that time, within comparative education, the advocates of the modernization theory and the structural foundationalism theory attacked each other. And it was really a phase of heterodoxy. And this started about in the 1970s. Beyond, since the 1990s, in the time spirit of postmodernism, a tolerance, even an appreciation of different paradigms developed in comparative education, and it's changed its name also to comparative and international education. During that time, people started advocating for an awareness and acknowledgement of multiple knowledge perspectives and not just one. And I think, again, everybody should recognize the discourse that has been since in the 21st century hit us and COVID. But let me go outside the spectrum of comparative and international education and just look a bit at the trajectory of world history. Started with pre-colonial era, of course, much longer before that. Then the nation state and nationalism that led to colonialism and imperialism, but also to a feeling of, or a sentiment of anti-colonialism and anti-imperialism. And I was just having a discussion with the very same friend whose computer I'm using at the moment, how in South Africa, people were very strong, had very strong feelings against imperialism. And it, of course, led to the establishment of our republic, as opposed to being part of the British Empire in, I think, 1948 or such. My history is a bit rusty. Then, of course, post-World War II, the development of the idea of a unified body for peace, the United Nations, and all of that came about. Also, increasingly independence for nation states in Africa, but largely maintaining the colonial boundaries. Later on, the dismantling of the Soviet state, globalization, the rapid expansion with that of new liberalism, and the rise of the global markets. And then, of course, 21st century and more recently, COVID. And I wanted you to understand how these actually move together. But if we look at the 21st century and COVID and other changes that came about, COVID really exposed our vulnerability beyond the virus, reinforcing our economical vulnerability. The realization that the nation state is really inadequate. They could not handle the challenges that came with COVID. I think we all looked around us and said the one government is as much a failure as the next in terms of dealing with challenges that was unexpected. But what we also see internationally is the rise of fascism. And if we go back in history, post the 1918 flu epidemic, exactly the same happened. We all know about Italian fascism. It developed straight after the flu pandemic there. We see the rise of nationalism. We see Brexit. We see extreme right-wing power developing in different parts, especially of the so-called Western world. And we see the disproportionate economical and social effects on COVID. I recently read an article that specifically cited how disproportionately women lost their jobs during and after COVID. Of course, we are all fully aware of tensions and war in different regions, also pre-COVID, but also currently in Eastern Europe. It's not a comfortable space that we are in. So, colleagues, that is the one scenario that I'm presenting to you. Taking us back to the notion of decolonization, Africanization, and internationalization. Decolonialization and Africanization is no new debate. We are aware of Nyerere, Nkrumah, and many others who already in the 1960s and even earlier voiced their concern for colonialism. Decolonizing higher education means interrogating the ongoing impact of legacies of colonialization and imperialism on education systems and knowledge production. The decolonial approach itself concerns itself with deconstructing existing hierarchies in favor of drawing on multiple knowledge systems and ways of knowing in order to integrate a range of perspectives. Remember, linking it also with the development in comparative education, with a particular focus on amplifying those voices that were previously and still underrepresented. Whereas Western knowledges are often presented ahistorically neutral and of universal value, decolonization advocates for the contextualization of all knowledge, including Western knowledge, with a historical, geographical, cultural, etc. framework, linking with comparative education again. And reshaping, specifically also the curriculum, is a key component to a culturally responsive pedagogy. Advocates of Africanization voice that we require generating and redefining educational standards to ensure that teaching and learning occurs within appropriate contexts of relevance. Yet what we see in education is really still neoliberalism, performativity, and very little of being culturally responsive, specifically also in our schools, in our institutions of higher learning, regulated by the state. If we look at internationalization of higher education, and I'm sure de Wit et al.'s definition is very familiar to you, claim to be the intentional process of integrating an international, intercultural, and global dimension into the purpose, function, and delivery of post-secondary education in order to enhance the quality of education, that's the claim, and quality of research for all students, emphasis on all, my own emphasis, and staff. And again, the claim to make a meaningful contribution to society. Do you recognize now higher education must solve all problems, as I alluded in the thinking in comparative education? The assumption is that there is such a thing as a common good. My question is, the world according to who? The study that I did with two colleagues provide interesting insights. We communicated by writing with scholars who crossed the border out of Africa and into Africa. So some were Africans traveling to other parts of the world, and others were from other parts of the world traveling into Africa. And interesting insights came to the fore. Well, to be honest, we as humans have always been on the move. And in the globalized 21st century, mobility has morphed almost into an ideology. If you don't move, it's frowned upon. we move for many reasons: curiosity, seeking adventure, for personal growth. And the names that I'm using here is not real names, it's pseudonyms. So for Teboho, it was about learning about how people live elsewhere. Valerie wanted to experience another culture. The bonus for Teboho was meeting people who came from different parts of the world and learning more about their home countries without actually having to go there. Ramesh was stirred by reading about Tarzan and Jane, though inaccurate and steeped in coloniality, as a child, and he traveled from India to South Africa. Travelers do not just go and do things somewhere else. Knowingly and unknowingly, they bring what they know and who they are to the host country. Monique shared how working in another world region allowed her to discover new ways of thinking about life. Jürgen provided the opportunity to consider the world through the lens of a different cultural and higher education context. Every opportunity, our journey is an opportunity to collect, but then also to plant seeds in the host country. Jade, coming into Africa, managed to align her values and convictions with her colleagues, fighting against the current corrupt and gender-biased system, because the politics need to change in order for the higher education system to change. Jürgen explained how his quest to be in an environment in which one can help shape the future has led him to perceive his own home country at that time as stagnant and limited in its willingness to transform. Reflecting on the value of the African culture and the values for higher education, participants remarked that sharing and togetherness, respect for the opinions and contributions of others, respect for culture, norms, and values of a society or community when interacting with others, and experiencing collaboration, joy, humor, and care gave them a sense of belonging. They placed a high particular emphasis on the spirit of Ubuntu, to uphold one's humanity by recognizing the humanity of others. Teboho explained that it helps us to function and exist in an arena that is sometimes filled with many conflicts and unexpected world epidemics, such as COVID. The spirit of Ubuntu cuts across all our differences. It sees each other as humans. It brings comfort. It builds resilience. Vanele said, how we relate to each other is important in the context of higher education, and the spirit of Ubuntu offers us a humane way in which we can foster healthy, meaningful relationships that are based on principles of respect, recognizing each other as humans with often similar needs. Although the gifts were offered respectfully and mindfully, epistemological difference emerged for visitors from the global north to Africa, highlighting the complexity of the situation, even for the borderland diasporans from geographical spaces. Jade is aware that her gender socialization differed from that of Ethiopian women. She said, Ethiopia is a patriarchal society. I was the only Black female faculty member with a PhD teaching in my college. The administration and faculty, primarily being all men, were sexist and not very friendly. So I won't respond in a manner that they used to. So she stood up. Zweli wrote about him listening and respecting the opinions of others, and it helped him to learn as much as possible from others. Yet he only spoke when he thought he had something valuable to contribute. Although this was a prized attitude possibly at home, in his host country, known for its individualism and candor, this might have been interpreted differently. For some, like Zawidi, living abroad cultivated a strong sense of Africanness and an appreciation for what is unique and distinctive about Africa. She always celebrated her heritage through her image, wearing beads, shells, cultural wear, natural hairstyles. Similarly, Medine would attend cultural evenings wearing his Sinhalese long dress, bringing Ethiopian coffee, Kenyan tea, to what he calls different peace jam occasions, sharing African poetry, and discussing traditional African conceptions of peace and conflict prevention using a collection of sayings and proverbs. Yet if we consider all of this, drawing from Mignolo's concept of decoloniality and his insistence on acknowledging that epistemology has a history and a place, and that decolonizing it by reaching out to and including the other South is not enough. Decoloniality is border thinking, and like post-qualitative inquiry that originates on the other side of qualitative research, it originates on the other side of the border, in the so-called third and second world. Yet higher education is dominated by Western epistemology, such as instrumental in providing particular knowledges and agendas. And teamed up with private enterprise, nationally and internationally, higher education has indeed become a key partner in the globalized knowledge economy, designed to shift education as a consumable product worldwide, generating money, expanding its influence by boosting its status, and ultimately growing the national economy by supplying employable workforce. Internationalization of higher education largely remains a process by which higher education systems are mainly exported from north to the south. While the discourse on internationalization of higher education centers around graduate attributes, global citizenship, international amelioration, and what I previously referred to as the common good, the aim really remains largely epistemic hegemony and homogeny. An advantage of opportunities offered in higher education. The diaspora academics coming from and to Africa in our study indicated that they benefit personally and professionally from collaboration. It has fostered migration of thinking, interdisciplinarity, intercultural communication and understanding, and it has definitely advanced their lived experience. But that begs the question, if what you know, in other words, epistemology, shapes who you are, in other words, ontology, is the African influence and contribution to scholarship in this episteme authentically African? Or is it Western epistemology based on scholarship contributed to by what Mignolo calls borderlanders, in other words, people outside the territory of the West? Diasporians, despite persistently proposing Ubuntu as a positive influence on Western epistemology, seem to have internalized the Western epistemology to the extent that when they cross the border, there seemed to be little thought given to exporting ontology and epistemology from Africa. Introducing their hosts to other ways of doing and knowing remains largely at the level of the particular and the individual, hair, dress, food, poetry, etc., rather than exposing the global north to indigenous African ontology. It remains mostly a cultural exchange, bordering on reinforcing the othering of border dwellers, the exotic. Borderland scholars immersed in Western epistemology, crossing to the global north, seem to pack what and how they've learned Western episteme, the persona that they think they ought to be, and the skills and knowledge required to be successful and acceptable out there. Robust African episteme. African scholars must integrate their own knowing, acting, and being into African scholarship. Different ontologies and epistemologies should not be othered and treated as oddities, something exotic, or remain on a social level with very little influence on scholarly activity. An epistemic turn requires an ontological turn based on integration of own knowledge, actions, and being. However, the strong Western epistemology has already shaped the African diasporian's ontology by its domination of knowledge, authority, economy, and our concept of where we fit in on the hierarchy in terms of gender, race, and religion. At least from these travelers' tales accounts, internationalization of higher education has not sufficiently mitigated the dominance of monopolar westernized epistemologies to accord scholarly contributions based on indigenous epistemologies and equal standing. To conclude, where is internationalization of higher education on the trajectory of comparative and international education? And I've at times just linked with it. From the reflection of the colleagues in our study, we certainly recognize travelers' tales, definitely. We recognize borrowing, but we know it failed. From the current discourse on international of higher education, certainly the social sciences phase can be identified as the solution to all. But is it? Have we indeed moved into the post realm, or are we stuck in neoliberal, Western, hegemonic safety? And have we considered what indeed is the role of higher education? Thank you, Philby.
Thank you. I was trying to get technology right. I think my mind is still a little bit colonized. Prof. Jacobs, what an amazing keynote. And you have made us think. One, I know we don't necessarily tie the impact of colonization and colonialism to education structures and how that ultimately impacts how we see or interpret Africanization and internationalization. Colleagues, I know we are virtual, but can you please help me give a round of applause to Professor Lynette for an excellent keynote, and she has set the tone well for our day and a half. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Philby.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, while our keynote is online, and our DVC, may I ask an immense favor from everyone? Can we quickly put on our cameras so that we can take a group picture? Is everyone's camera on? There we go. I see the three of us. Cameras are going on. They're going on. Okay, they're coming. They're coming. More and more colleagues. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you. Thank you. Cameras are going on. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you. Shomelang Metzing, can you please take our group picture? Thank you, colleagues. You'll give a thumbs up when the group picture is done. You have to cue us. So colleagues, let's do our big Colgate and Sensodyne and Aquafresh smile. Prof. Mashele is missing. Okay, all right. Are you done, Metzi? You are muted, I can't hear you.
I'm saying my laptop is giving problems. Stony, can you kindly
smile, colleagues? Please smile. We are busy taking a picture. Please smile.
Thank you.
Yes, we're done. Thanks.
Thank you. Colleagues, as we're doing very well for time, and thank you for that. If you allow me, may I continue on and introduce our keynote at our panel dialogue panelists for today. And they will be speaking on a topic, demystifying correlation between internationalization, Africanization, and decolonization. We have 10 minutes before our Vice Chancellor joins us. And I wanted to find out from our panelists, do we take a body break now for 10 minutes, or can we continue and then we will break? Professor Mashau, can you continue and then there'll be a break between you and Dr. Mushanga? Are our panel comfortable with that break in the program? Professor Mashau?
You
Okay,
can type
while
in
we're
the
waiting,
comments as well.
okay, all right. While we're waiting for colleagues to join in, may I then introduce our panelists for today? We have two panelists. They were selected because of their in-depth work and writing and publication they are doing in the field of Africanization and decolonization. Let me introduce our first panelist for today, Professor Takalani Mashau. Professor Takalani Mashau became a lecturer at the University of Venda in 2010. He completed his D.Ed in 2013 and later became a senior lecturer. He was promoted to the position of associate professor in 2016. He had been an HOD of the now defunct Education Management Department and currently is the Deputy Dean of Research and Postgraduate Studies at the Faculty of Humanities, Social Sciences and Education. He has published extensively in peer-reviewed journals. So far, he has published 48 papers, 5 book chapters. He is the co-editor of a Journal of Educational Studies. He has presented papers in international and national conferences and has supervised 18 master and 6 doctoral students to completion. He has been a member of the NRF funded programs, and he is currently coordinating the Keep It Cool Climate Change Education Project, which is sponsored by the Flanders VVOB and the Green Matter. He is also part of the Higher Education Reform Experts South Africa, HESA, under TENESA. Colleagues, please help me welcome Professor Takalani Mashau, who will be giving us a perspective of how he is going to dissemble and demystify decolonization, internationalization, and Africanization. And at the end, we're going to tie into the presentation that was made by our keynote so that it really makes sense on why we are saying decolonization, internationalization, Africanization are the melting pot of higher education. Professor Mashau.
Thank you very much, Refilo, for the time and also invitation to this Family Week. The presentation is looking at the demystifying correlation between internationalization, Africanization, and decolonization. The concepts internationalization, Africanization, decolonization have been described differently according to the understanding of different researchers and authors. These are the concepts that institutions of higher learning are grappling with. To be part of the international community as far as higher education is concerned, the Department of Higher Education and Training has introduced policy framework for internationalization of higher education training of higher education in South Africa. The policy framework is more on internationalization than Africanization and decolonizations. Institutions of higher learning have to navigate how they Africanize and decolonize their education on their own. In this presentation, I will try to make all these concepts clear and understandable. I will also make a way of relating or connecting all of them in higher education, which is not easy. Firstly, we look at the internationalization. Knight describes internationalization of higher education as the process of integrating an international, intercultural, and global dimension into the goals of teaching and learning, research and community engagement of a university or higher education system. Internationalization emphasizes the relationship between and among nations, people, cultures, institutions, and systems. For this Family Week, my discussion on internationalization will be based on Professor Jonas Stier's research, who is a professor of social work at Mälardalen University in Sweden. His research focuses on identity, discourses, participation, diversity, intercultural interactions, knowledge production and social change, which are migration and digitization, and their consequences for people, groups, organizations, and for society as a whole. In his research, he states that in the modern era of education, people are more connected globally than ever before, rendering the need to discuss their internationalization. Commonly used with economic circles, internationalization relates to the increasing involvement of company or educational institution within international markets akin to globalization. Steer defines educational internationalization as the ability for teaching and learning to be increasingly involved with international cultures in order to enhance globalized learning. Jonas Steer refers to three ideologies of internationalization with higher education. That is idealism, which is unrealistic belief in or pursuit of perfection. Number two is instrumentalism. Education is a tool of activity. And the third one is educationalism. That is the belief in education as an approach or strategy. So out of these ideologies, the idealism, instrumentalism, educationalism, he brought in some understanding of what he means by idealism, what he means by instrumentalism and educationalism. In idealism, it talks about creating a more democratic, fair, and equal world, which is very, very important to me. This is the idea of internationalization, democratic, fair, and equal world. In instrumentalism, it talks about inherent pragmatic and economic goals. The instrument as how education should look like. In educationalism, it talks about a wider and a deeper view on education. I won't go on with all these explanations because of time. So one of the goals of internationalization is to enhance a globalized framework of education through the ideologies of idealism, instrumentalism, and educationalism. A critical look may suggest that the economic benefits of higher educational institutions are levied due to the high tuition rates of international students compared to those of domestic students. I'm not sure whether South African universities are benefiting from revenue of international students. Khan describes internationalization of higher education as a beneficial in sustaining and growing science and scholarship through dynamic academic exchanges and building social and economic capacity in developing countries. Now, from internationalization, I then come to Africanization. What is Africanization? Ramusi describes Africanization as a conscious and deliberate assertion of nothing more or less than the right to be an African. The Sankofa Youth Movement describes Africanization as the embracing of African heritage and developing a sense of loyalty towards the motherland, which is Africa. This involves adopting and promoting African culture, putting it on the pedestal currently occupied by the West. Minji has this assertion in general. Education in Africa has not been relevant to the needs of African societies. The fundamental problem is in this regard is that educational structures were formulated by colonial powers who had a cultural background different from that found among Africans. Decades of self-rule and independence have not succeeded in empowering Africans by enabling them to determine their own indigenous African educational framework. In this part, this difficulty is a result of the continued social and economic ties between African countries and their former colonial proprietors. Although Africa is politically independent, it remains technologically and economically independent on countries that colonized it before. As such, the current educational structures in Africa are meant mainly to foster this bond instead of twisting it. Any reforms in African education are conceived and implemented within the framework of this relationship, and hence they cannot proceed far enough to develop and foster indigenous African knowledge systems. Marilyn Naidoo refers to Africanization as a renewed focus on Africa a reclaiming of what has been taken from Africa and forms part of post-colonialist and anti-racist discourse. Africanizing the curriculum involves developing scholarship and research established in African intellectual traditions. The idea is that this education will produce people who are not alienated from their communities and are sensitive to the challenges facing Africa. However, the idea of Africanization is highly contested and may evoke a false or at least a superficial sense of belonging, further marginalization, or it may emphasize relevance. Now, coming to decolonization. Decolonization is the process of exposing and dismantling colonist power in all its forms in Africa, the institutions of learning. In education, this refers to the knowledge, language, and the entire institutional culture that sustains universities in Africa and South Africa. These are the pillars that have sustained the Euro-American culture, while it muted African indigenous knowledge and cultures in the institution of learning, even post our political independence. Decolonization of education is the eradication of colonialist epistemologies and social practice in order to centralize Africa's own. Decolonization is a nuanced, layered concept. Its meaning cannot be unlocked using a scientific formula, receipts, or definitions. An understanding of the process of decolonization lies more in its detail than its definition. This is contrary to the definition given by Sabaton on decolonization of curriculum in 4 different ways. For this presentation, 2 of these are found to be relevant. The first one, decolonizing the curriculum asks people to perceive assumptions of the world. In many disciplines, it is accepted that in the past, assumptions regarding racial and civilizational hierarchy informed a lot of thinking about how the world works, what is worth studying in it, and how it should be studied. It is true that most of these assumptions have been challenged with the fall of colonial rule. Many persist in public discourse as well as academic study. For example, whilst it might be difficult to call societies backward explicitly today, many theories and practice of development depend on this very assumption. Secondly, decolonizing the curriculum is a question about the implications of a more diverse student body in terms of pedagogy and achievement. In most cases, societies live in structural inequalities of different kinds. For example, academics may find it difficult to give their students equal opportunities to flourish and succeed. This includes defining and dealing with racism as it is woven into different aspects of university life. Decolonizing the curriculum may mean many things, and it's not something that happens overnight. It requires a sustained and serious commitment within the institution and across the sector. Correlation between internationalization and Africanization and decolonization. Internationalization of education deals with international or intercultural aspects of teaching, research, and community engagement at universities. In other words, internationalization of higher education is the process of integrating an international or intercultural aspect into the teaching, research, and community engagement. Giben and Khan go further and argue that the internationalization of higher education can be beneficial in sustaining and growing science and scholarship through dynamic academic exchanges and building social and economic capacity in developing countries. In support of internationalization of education and higher education in South Africa, the department has introduced the policy as I alluded before. To me, there is very little or thin line between Africanization and decolonization. On Africanization, Paswal is of the opinion that the process of Africanization recognizes the validity and relevance of African knowledge in global knowledge production. What is commonly known as African indigenous knowledge should be included in the global knowledge system and recognized as part of human knowledge within the university curriculum. Within the African context, this should also entail decentering the colonial languages as languages of instruction and power on the continent. With so many definitions of curriculum decolonization, researchers are of the opinion that it will be difficult for South African universities to decolonize the curriculum. Interestingly, universities in South Africa have students from different countries in the continent. Though our universities have students from our continent, most universities are still predominantly dominated by groups, the race and ethnicity of people who were there before 1994. Former Afrikaans universities stand a better chance of continuing to practice their culture and language as they have developed their language over many decades compared to predominantly African universities. For example, universities are dominated by different cultures. For example, if the University of Venda is dominated by Venda culture, decolonization of the curriculum should be phased in using Venda culture and language. Remember, South African universities' demography has not changed drastically. The races, the ethnic groups that were there before 1994 are still dominating. If this kind of decolonizing curriculum happens in South Africa, there will be no movement of people from their respective areas to other areas of the country. It will be like this as language will become a barrier. This is like reviving promotion of Bantu Self-Government Act of 1959. In conclusion, for many decades, African academics and their students have called for decolonization and Africanization of educational curricula, but this has never seen the light of the day. Decolonizing and Africanizing need activists and champions who will lead these kinds of transformations. But the question is, where are they? Unfortunately, academics and their students propagate these ideas in silos. Maybe South African universities can learn lessons on how Aborigines decolonized education in Latin America, where the Spanish and the Portuguese were. We can also learn from India, which was colonized by the English, on how she decolonized her education. If we analyze just ideology and idealism, when people call for decolonization and Africanization, they want an education that can create a more democratic, fair, and equal world. Education which has the ambition to create a world order at a global scale. Education that includes tolerance, respect, democratic values, and personal commitment to helping less fortunate people. And education which is conceived as a one-way flow of knowledge. Thank you very much. Back to you, Professor.
Thank you, Prof. Wow. You have just echoed a quotation by Professor Kwame, by Honorable Kwame Nkrumah, where he says, it is clear that we must find an African solution to our problems, and that this can only be found in African unity. Divided we are weak. United Africa could become one of the greatest forces of good in the world. And you've just echoed it when you called on South Africans to find solutions and learn from countries such as India and the Aboriginal. I think, Prof, you have started to really demystify the concepts that we are having today on discussion. I just want to check, I had said that our Vice Chancellor will join at 1. I see he is not yet on, and we are going to request that the program then continue, and we will revert back to our Vice Chancellor the moment he joins. He's still in a commitment with the executives. Colleagues, can I ask if there are any questions for our panelists for today before I hand over to Professor Mushunga, to Dr. Mushunga? I'm also checking in the comment box. There are no questions yet. There is a question. Vungai, please go ahead. Colleagues, can we help unmuting Vungai?
He is unmuted. Vungai, you can come in.
Thank you very much for unmuting me. I'm enjoying the presentations. My question is, how do we Africanize when we continue to find our solution in a language that is colonial? Thank you.
Professor Mashau, there's one question for you. Prof. Takalani. Okay, while Prof. Takalani is okay.
You know, there's this central muting where I try to unmute myself, I can't, but fortunately I'm here now. Okay, how do we Africanize? This one is very difficult question, especially, you know, you see, in Africa, we have close to 3,000 languages. This means we have more than 3,000 cultures. And then, like I said, in South Africa, where we have 11 official languages, the Khoi, the San, and the Nama, together with sign languages, which makes it about 14 languages. So if we are saying that, okay, like for instance, our universities are still predominantly dominated by the cultures that were there before 1994. If you come to University of Venda, you'll find that the University of Venda is predominantly Vendas. Then how do we Africanize? It means that we are saying that if we are saying that we are Africanizing university, using the curriculum, using the language, which is dominating here, it means that people who are educated from this area will never go out of this area. That is why I put in the act of the promotion of Bantu self-government of 1959. Are we promoting that one? Or do we want to Africanize in such a way that we are saying we have common language, which all of us as South Africans will understand, and which will be that common language of all these universities? That is the question that we should grapple with, and which I was saying that universities are still grappling with the concept of decolonization and also Africanization, because we don't have a common culture. We have this diverse culture. Very difficult to go out of where we are at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Is there another question? Maybe to stimulate conversation, maybe we could, if Prof. Mashingu could answer, do you think then the other concept of Africanization and internationalization can be enablers for us as Africans to truly decolonize after learning and taking examples from other countries on how they managed to decolonize, accommodating the diversity that we have in Africa? Spare, your hand is noted. Can we take another question, Prof? You've noted my question. Spare, over to you. Colleagues, please unmute Spare.
Thank you, Mary Philo. Mine would just be to ask, how far in our decolonization efforts do we try to bridge the gap between institutions, business, and civic societies? Because it does happen that the education is decolonized, but students still find themselves faced with what is called structural unemployment, whereby, yes, the education is decolonized, but they still find themselves with skills that are not aligned with what is required by the market, which they have to go and work in. So I just want to check, how far do we try to bridge that gap of decolonization between the institutions of our learning, business, and the civic societies?
Thank you, Spare. What a powerful question. Prof. Takalani, Mashau, can you please, if possible, respond, and then we will take another 2 rounds of questions and then hand over to Dr. Mashau, to Dr. Mushonga.
Yeah, you see, with I'm not sure whether universities are ready really to, or they have started yet to Africanize in terms of joining the communities and for employment industries and for employment. But the emphasis is there on community engagement. What are we doing as universities to assist communities outside our university, the immediate communities out of our universities, because that is very important, because universities should work for people who are around it to alleviate them from poverty. Then, coming to industries, we still have one curriculum which I always say it's so worrying to sciences that we will never go out of poverty, because always we are teaching students who are going to look for employment instead of teaching students who will, after graduating, will create employment for others. You see, now the Department of Basic Education is talking about 2 or maybe 3 curricular area, which is academic, which is technical, and the other one, I forgot that other one. But this is a curriculum which are going to give skills for learners, because they will go out for practical 70, the other one is 75% of practicals, the other one is 50% for practicals, which makes when they come to university, for instance, now, University of Technologies and the University Cooperative University and Historical Universities are still fighting for same students who are not technically advanced. They are going to technical universities. So I think it is time for us now as a country to say, let's contribute to such an extent that everybody can see that universities are trying to alleviate poverty to the communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. There was one question that you haven't responded to, but as you are gathering your thoughts, taking another round of questions. Are there any more questions for Professor Mashao? I'm checking. Stone and Metzing, can you also help me check and monitor the chat box? All right. There are no questions at this point in time. Let me see. Oh, there's a hand from Vongai. Please unmute Vongai.
Vongai, you're more welcome to come in.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Thank you very much for giving me that opportunity to ask again. My question this time is, who are we Africanizing for? I mean, if you as an individual in a university, you really feel strongly that we need to Africanize, who else are you taking on board? Are you taking on board the student? Is it the youth? Is it the staff with you at that university or in that region or in that continent? How have we made it possible for other Africans to be ready for this Africanization? Are we united in this cause? How are we? What is our strategy? Thank you.
Thank you, Vongai. Prof, I think this would be better responded by you. And just to get Dr. Mushunga in the mix of things, you can also interject, Doc, if you feel like you have a response before you present. Prof Mashao, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vongai. The question is, who is Africanizing for who? Like I said, do we have activists? I asked this question. Do we have activists, the champions of Africanizing? Because we are mostly in silos. We are talking of this in silos. Then Africanization, you're Africanizing the institution for the students, you Africanize the institution for the academics, whoever in the institution as an African, in an African institution, if we have champions, activists, that is where we say all within the institution, the whole community of each and every institution becomes African. If we have activists and champions who will champion Africanism and Africanization. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. The participants today are asking very difficult questions. Dr. Mshunga, are you online? As Dr. Mshunga is getting himself ready, is there another round of questions? No questions, colleagues. I think just to, if I can play the referee and the player, there is a quotation by Marco Bizzarri, and it really ties into the comments made by Vongai and Professor Mashao, where it says diversity and inclusion, which are the real grounds for creativity, must remain at the center of what we are. So as different as the three concepts of higher education are, the underlying basis is that they promote diversity and inclusion. And perhaps it is up to us to really look at how we can implement the three concepts intertwined with each other, but not separate from one another, as they both promote diversity. All three promote diversity and inclusion. Are there any more questions? Then I'm going to take this time. Stone and Metzing, is Dr. Mshunga online?
He's not online, and I think he's using somebody's device. If so, can he kindly let us know which device he's using?
All right. As we are waiting for Dr. Mshunga, please comment in the chat box so that we can track where we are. And in the meantime, I'm going to take time to then introduce Dr. Mashingo by reading his bio. And a quick announcement, colleagues, our Vice Chancellor will join us shortly. He is wrapping up the meeting that he is in, and we can then hear him officially welcome us and just give his way and input on how far CUT has come in this journey of comprehensive internationalization, the milestones that we have achieved, and how we have ended up saying in our Vision 2030 that we want to become a leading university in Africa. So I think the leadership there was already thinking about Africanization, decolonization, and internationalization. And they are using those concepts in trying to achieve their vision. Please allow me to quickly just give a summary of Dr. Mshunga. Allow me, colleagues, to introduce this dynamic speaker. Dr. Mshunga is a post-colonial and decolonial researcher who enjoys operating in the margins. He's previously taught history at the University of Zimbabwe, history, environmental history, and culture and heritage studies at the National University of Lesotho, and is currently teaching history, gender, and Africa studies at the University of the Free State. He is a program director for Africa Studies in the Center for Gender and Africa Studies at the University of the Free State. He was a co-investigator in the documentation of the history of the liberation struggle in Southern African Project 2008 to 2010, a co-investigator in the Debating Higher Education in Lesotho project 2030, a co-investigator in the Understanding Persistence of Political Instability in Lesotho in the 1966 to 2016, and this project took place in 2016 to 2017. A co-investigator in the Liberation War radios in Southern Africa, 1960 to 1990s. This project took place in 2017 to 2019. He is currently a principal investigator in the humanities and a decolonial challenge. A comprehensive study of the University of the Free State, the University of Western Cape, and Salt Lake University, 2020 to 2022. A principal investigator in the border, the Bantu Trust, and the Rainbow Nation contradictory mix of discreteness and continuity in oral histories, transnational communities in the borderlands of Lesotho, South Africa, 2020 to 2022. A co-investigator in the rehumanizing of medical profession, a case of accessible vocabularies of maternal and child infectious and non-communicable diseases, South Africa, 2021 to 2022, a team leader, researcher in the internationalization of the curriculum, IOC, curriculum transformation and curriculum decolonization, and collaborative international learning, COIL, a co-investigator in the ABC of decoloniality, a guide for university students and staff project 2022 to 2023, and a co-investigator in Shelves Within Shelves of University Campus, the intersectionality of student identity development in transnational societies, 2022 to 2023. He is also a global academic director of the Decolonial International Network. Colleagues, this is a mouthful and an impactful CV. I now give over to Dr. Mashingo to give us his response to us demystifying the context of Africanization, decolonization, internationalization, the melting pot of higher education. Okay, it seems like Dr. Mashingo is not here. Can I then advise while we are trying to connect him? We are going to play a short video of our facilities, and we will be back online at 13:35. Then you will hear my voice again, and hopefully our Vice Chancellor will be on so that you can hear him for the day. And then in accordance to our program, we will do the question and answer and then wrap up. Metzing and Stone, you can play the video until 13:35.
University of Technology, popularly referred to as the CUT, is the foremost higher education institution in the heartland of South Africa. Boasting campuses in Bloemfontein and Welkom in the Free State, CUT is dedicated to quality education and training in science, engineering and technology. Formerly known as Technikon Free State, the establishment first opened its doors in 1981 with 285 students enrolled in mainly secretarial, art and design programs. In 2004, with the restructuring of the higher education landscape, CUT embraced its new status as a University of Technology. Now, with student headcount of over 19,000 in 4 faculties, namely Engineering and Information Technology, Humanities, Management Sciences, and Health and Environmental Sciences, the university continues to make a positive contribution to the social and technological innovation outcomes in the Central Region. CUT's diverse student community is also a true reflection of the region's demographic. The CUT is the only university in Central South Africa to offer programs such as engineering, radiography, clinical and biomedical technology, hospitality, and tourism management. Since 1990, nearly 53,000 students have been kept at this leading facility. During 2014 and 2015, the Department of Electrical, Electronic and Computer Engineering introduced the Higher Certificate in Renewable Energy Technologies and a National Diploma in Sustainable Energy. CUT's research and innovation leadership in many areas, especially 3D printing, is world-class. The Center for Rapid Prototyping and Manufacturing is a world-class facility. In 2016, CUT was the first institution in Africa and amongst only a few in the world to receive the International Organization for Standardization certification for design and manufacture of medical devices. 38 years of academic excellence ensures students are in good hands when studying at CUT. The Idea Generator Center offers a development hub where students, staff, and even the public can develop their innovative ideas and projects. The Central University of Technology Free State's history, from its humble beginnings to the proud institution it is today, is reflected in its buildings. CUT has invested about 600 million rand in various key facilities for students and staff through funding from the Department of Higher Education and Training and Council as their contributions towards this investment. Both our campuses house a full array of modern, state-of-the-art library information services, well-equipped laboratories and lecturing venues, student cafeterias, extended computer hours, 24-hour security, vibrant student centers with a variety of student activities and services. The first phase of the university's infrastructure project brought about 6 beautiful and state-of-the-art buildings, 2 of which are on the Welkom campus. On the Bloemfontein campus, the Yarona building houses the Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics or STEM Academy and the Faculty of Engineering and Information Technology. The Ellen Kuzwayo building is a 3-story high building housing lecturing halls, labs and offices of the Faculty of Health and Environmental Sciences. The Tatai Song and Kopanong buildings are home to the Faculty of Humanities. These buildings enabled the expansion of the teacher education programs to increase teacher training programs in science, engineering, technology, and mathematics. The Tutong building on the Welkom campus consists of computer science labs with lecturing rooms, study labs, and micro-lesson classrooms. The Mangaliso Robert Sobukwe building houses communications and information technology. It has computer labs, lecture rooms and offices with a recording studio. Student residences Unity, Ikayaletu, Maya Angelou, Protea East and West, as well as Maipatu Mokatsane were built to the tune of 73.4 million rand. At the Bloemfontein campus, student residences worth 43.7 million were also constructed. Other new and renovated buildings include the Dirkutse extension, which now boasts upgraded labs, including new radiology labs, as well as a new beauty salon for somatology. In Bloemfontein, the Eendracht and Mannheim residences received a makeover, and students can now also enjoy upgraded vending gazebos, cafeteria, and food zone, 24-hour study areas in the library, as well as new PC labs. The hotel school's entrance area, bar area, and restaurant have also received an upgrade, along with the bathrooms at the Boetroski Hall. Furthermore, the CUT's Bloemfontein campus also boasts new teacher education and engineering buildings with further refurbishment of the e-learning, humanitas, art, engineering technology, and teacher education buildings.
Thank you, Medzing. Dr. Mushonga is online. We have been waiting for you patiently and very excited after reading your bio. Without wasting any time, Dr. Mushonga, over to you and give us your perspectives of how we demystify and the correlation between internationalization, Africanization, and decolonization. Dr. Mushonga, over to you. Colleagues, please unmute Dr. Mushonga.
He's unmuted.
Thank you, Refile. And good afternoon to all of you, and probably good morning and good evening to colleagues joining us from other parts of the globe. I'm sorry for my problems with connectivity, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to last long, but I hope so, and I will share quick thoughts. And my assumption, Refile, that maybe as a panel discussion, probably we have to engage with the issues raised by the keynote speaker. Of course, I saw the titles, I saw the topics or issues to be discussed, but I thought they were zeroing on that. But having said that, I still can contribute something in the next 5 or so minutes, to this discussion on decolonization, internationalization, and Africanization, because I'm just going to speak from the cuff. My ideas will not be properly organized or coherent, but I think some of them will make sense. I would like to start by saying that we are living in an era of huge uncertainty, an era that is punctuated by, lots of debate, lots of discussions, lots of disagreements about what knowledge is, and even the idea of knowledge itself. The knowledge of knowledge itself is actually being contested in the 21st century. And this is happening precisely because of the resurgent and insurgent decolonization, which has brought us to this. Why are we having this kind of, era of contestation and uncertainty? I can point to two major issues here, which I call crises. That is, we have what I may call the systemic crisis and also an epistemic crisis. And these are the two crises that punctuate the 21st century. And in terms of the systemic crisis, I think what is happening around the globe, around the world, is that capitalism is in its terminal stages. So there is a terminal capitalist crisis, which cascades into an ecological crisis, exploding social divisions and ruptures. So that's the first systemic crisis at the global level. And the second crisis, which I call epistemic crisis, which I have already advanced, is this uncertainty in the knowledge domain. As a result of the irrelevance and as a result of the exhaustion of existing knowledge, there is a lot that is being questioned around. And so those are the two issues that I can point out, so that at least we have an idea. But why are we where we are today? My hunch is that we are where we are today because, one, I want to start by submitting that all living beings need to know in order to live, and they need to live in order to know. Why is this? This is because without knowing, there is no living, and without living, there is no knowing. So this is very important. All living beings, they need to know in order to live, and to live in order to know. So we are at this point, what I call a decolonial departure point, where we submit that all human beings are born into valid and legitimate knowledge systems. But the moment of the arrival of Western modernity, that moment of encounter changed everything. People were being told, you don't have knowledge, you don't have gods, you don't have culture, you don't have anything, and people became surprised and they were questioning that, because we are all born into valid knowledge systems. So this moment when Europe was expanding to other parts of the world, it started now claiming to be the only embodiment of knowledge, and delegitimized and rubbished other knowledges. And not only that, but also tried to claim that they don't have knowledge at all. And then in the process, trying to make their own knowledge, their own cultures, their own belief systems, cosmologies, and what have you, universal. And this is the reason why we have so much problems around the globe. So the cognitive empire that was spread across the globe was a particular type of cognitive empire, Western empire, Western knowledge systems and culture. And so in the process, what was happening, genocides were committed. And these genocides, which were committed, obviously physical elimination of women, children, men, and you name it. But they were also accompanied by three special types of genocides. That is epistemicides, that is the killing of other people's knowledge. Linguicides, the killing of other people's languages, and of course, culturecides, the killing of other people's culture sides. So the long-term consequence was that Western education became propagated as the only valid and legitimate form of socialization of humanity across space and time. And so this created a problem. So in this 21st century, what are we crying for? What are we yearning for? We are yearning for epistemic freedom, all of us. And this is why the movement of 2015 and 16, Rhodes Must Fall and Fees Must Fall, those were decolonial mediations and decolonial meditations where students were crying for epistemic freedom, because we do not have that epistemic freedom yet. That's why even Steve Bandu Biko wrote, I write what I want. He could not have said, I write what I want, if he was not denied epistemic virtue. And so this is the problem that we have. So in the 21st century, what is the problem? The problem is that we have this unfinished business of African epistemic decolonization. So for me, if you want to talk about Africanization, what I will submit is that what we are crying and yearning for, especially in the knowledge domain, is about African epistemic decolonization and nothing at all. This is why one of the students of Walter Mignolo actually simply put it this way: coloniality is not over, but all over. So because the West actually invented a special type of social pyramid where people were put into zones of being and zones of non-being and stuff, if you follow So coloniality of power, according to Ramon Gross-Fogel, cannot therefore be described in a single word, but in terms of hierarchies of power, meaning that it is entangled, because you cannot say it is racial power, you cannot say it is heteronormative power, you cannot say it is this or that or that. That's why if you check his work, he talks of modern / colonial / racial colonial / heteronormative / sexist and what have you, in order to describe this entangled colonial matrix of power. And the colonial matrix of power is what governs the world today. So in terms of decolonization, I have already submitted, it has to do with critical entanglement with what are known as a settled knowledge. Whether these are settled knowledges or settled epistemologies are Western or non-Western, but of course, largely Western. But we have to deal with that and we have to disrupt that. In fact, I think most of you would know that there's this whole idea of situated, embodied, unembodied and unsituated knowledges, this whole idea. On the other hand, the idea of neutral, objective, and, unsituated knowledge. So we have to deal with all those problems because they are part of our lived realities. And my submission is that whenever we are talking about decolonization, we should start from where we are, and we should start with who we are, and we should start talking about it from our own personal identities, from our own personal experiences, and from our own way of looking at the world, and not allowing the other world to describe us to other us or through their own gaze. Because that is very important, because if you start by where you are, who you are, with your identity, because I cannot disentangle my identity in my writing, my religion in my writing, my cosmology in my writing, my environment in my writing. So knowledge is situated, knowledge is embodied, and knowledge is subjective. The other one, I don't agree with it, because I don't think there's anything called objective knowledge or truth for that matter. So that's what I would say in terms of, this whole idea of trying to decolonize. Sorry, Madam, just remind me, I don't want to overrun the time. Just remind me how much time do I have?
Prof, you can still continue for another 5 minutes and then we'll start having engagement.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you very much. Right. Let me now move so in terms of decolonization, I would simply say that, decolonization is actually a cry for epistemic freedom and the need to engender a new pluriversal world civilization. Another world civilization is possible. Europe had the best chance to engender a pluriversal, harmonious, inclusive world civilization, but they wasted their time. They wasted that opportunity by trying to divide people, by trying to conquer nature. And so we are crying for a new world civilization. That's what decoloniality is all about. It's a pluriversality. In terms of internationalization, I would actually say, this whole idea of, standardization and uniformity and benchmarking. I'm just talking from the idea of, the academic. This is where the whole idea of internationalization comes. Of course, at the bigger global picture level, I think there are issues of the political, issues of the economic, and several other issues that inform this whole discourse of internationalization. But then it is therefore that by enhancing the international dimension of teaching, research, and studies, there is a value that is added to the quality of the education system. Yet the question is, whose international dimension is this? Whose need should be advanced and addressed? Internationalization could actually mean local knowledge is becoming part of higher education on equal terms with dominant knowledges, and that is important. But what we currently see and what is currently happening, this is almost like this whole idea of creating global linear university with global linear thinking. And that global linear universities with global linear thinking is driven by the West. And we, from where we are in the global South, we have to be very careful and not to fall into that trap, because it is almost like this idea of trying to complete the incomplete project of the conquest of the world, through some of these processes known as internationalization. So at the center of internationalization, I can actually see that there is this tension, as I have already said, between the agenda of completing the incomplete project of modernity, which actually dovetails into the current, neoliberal capitalist globalization and its kind of global trend, towards the creation of global universities. And on the other hand, of course, what I have already talked about, the resurgent and insurgent agenda of completing the incomplete project of decolonization, predicated on issues of de-racialization, de-hierarchization, decorporatization, and many other forms of rehumanizing, world. So it is very important. And at the epistemic level, there emerged an epistemic hierarchy, of course, as I've already said, that privileged Western knowledge. And this is the agenda for me under internationalization. If we are not careful, I'm not trying to do it outrightly, but we just need to be careful in terms of what we might get if we don't watch the space clearly. So let's try and guard against the installation of what may be called global university, which push a project of global linear thinking. That is not proper. And finally, just to say that in terms of Africanization, I think it comes back to the same thing. Africanization must be seen as a long and ongoing struggle for an African university. An African university is yet to be born. What we have in Africa are universities in Africa, because we are still struggling with, epistemologies, curriculum, forms of knowing, forms of doing, and what have you, that have been given to us by the West. So we don't have African universities. We have universities in Africa. And so we need to guard against that and then say we have arrived when we have not really arrived at all. So the struggle for an African university is the need for us to make sure that we engender what is truly African, what is truly global in terms of knowledges. Actually, we need to have ecologies of knowledge, and this not this idea of a global economy of knowledge. So those are some of the issues that I can deposit with regards to Africanization, especially within the knowledge domain. Of course, at the bigger global, societal, regional, continental level, I think Africanization must also mean completing the incomplete project of decolonization, that is the political decolonization of eradicating poverty, eradicating, hunger, eradicating, femicide, gender-based violences, and many other things. So for me, that is how I would frame these things. Otherwise, allow me to say thank you for now.
Thank you, Dr. Mashunga. You have really made us think. I just want to start the conversation. Yes, Vongai, your hand has been noted. Just to get the conversation going. In your discussion, you have just noted that a epistemicide has taken place. So the question that I want to pose to both you and Prof. Takalani Mashinwa is, what is the impact and legacy of epistemicide on higher education in Africa and in South Africa? And what should the universities start doing now that you've mentioned that we don't truly have an African identity university, but rather we have still the Eurocentric heritage of university? With that said, allow me to recognize Kay Mohotu to our webinar. Welcome, and I hope that the discussion that has been taking place is impactful, meaningful, and you can also engage in. Vongai, over to you. Colleagues, please unmute her.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Mashunga, for that high-powered presentation, a presentation that shows that you are very much alert, very much active in that area. But my worry is the more I listen to you, the more I feel like this whole discourse will remain an idea in somebody's head. How far have we traveled so far? Do we have any tangibles of the decoloniality since some of us are 40 years plus into what we call independence, of course, in quotes, what is there for us to see that we are going into some direction? I don't seem to see. Maybe if you can tell me what we have achieved so far, that's one. Number two, I quite agree with you that we have African universities in terms of the geography. African universities because they are in Africa. But African university, which is created by a true African, will we ever have it? Do we still have somebody who is purely African? Are we able to define Africanness? Thank you.
Thank you, Vongai. Before our panelists comment, can I ask Kay Mokgotu, your hand was up. Please share your thoughts. Colleagues, please unmute Kay Mokgotu.
Oh no, my hand was not up. I was just uploading. I was just feeling what Prof. Mshonga was saying when he was saying we need to be careful, very, very careful. More especially if we check what is happening now, it's more like completing the incomplete mission. But then now, my question might be simple. Like as young as we are, from them who are experienced, what it can be a mission. I understand what is just stipulated later on. What can be a mission to be recognized as to be recognized as international or as global? Because he also talked about this thing of benchmarking is the one which is also narrowing our mind. So I just want to know what can happen. What are they initiating? What can we do from them as experienced as they are?
Thank you, good sir. While I'm going to bring in Prof. Mashau and Dr. Mushingwa, I think let's also draw from our keynote who really took the time to explain how South Africa has landed itself in a space, or colonial countries land them in a space where they really need to rethink and decolonize and understand the impact of internationalization to higher education, and how those three concepts can be brought around to try to achieve a common goal. I don't know between Professor Mashau and Dr. Mashingu who wants to go first. You can just interject and let's really go through some of the comments that have come through and the latest comments, and how do we go about truly demystifying these contexts? Over to you, Prof. Alani Mashau.
Well, guys, asking very difficult questions. But what do we have as Africans to show that we have started to decolonize? We have started Africanization. You see, it's bits and pieces that we have at the moment. You remember the formation of Pan-Africanism, the 1800s, coming to Africa in 1957, 1958, coming to South Africa with the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azani to say that let us be Africans. But now, looking at what we are at the moment in South Africa, there is no initiative of taking over to say that it is time for us to Africanize our institutions. Nevertheless, we have not yet started to Africanize ourselves outside the universities. That is why I was saying that it is a little bit difficult to distinguish between Africanization and decolonization. But when it comes to internationalization, we are there because we are funded, like what Dr. Mshonga was saying, to say we must be conscious about this internationalization. We are there, the space is there. That is why there is a policy on internationalization. But we don't have it at decolonization level, at Africanization level. This is what we are thinking we should do as universities, but who exactly? In which university? Who is responsible to lead? That is why I talked about activism, which is not there at all. Well, I don't know, Dr. Mshonga will end upon what I've said. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Dr. Mshonga?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Prof. I think you have actually addressed some of the issues and concerns raised. And I don't want to repeat that. I just want to add to what you have already said. Maybe let me start by saying, in trying to answer all the issues to Hutu and others. Just to say that we must start by looking at ourselves. We must start with the man or woman in the mirror. We cannot talk decoloniality or decolonization if we don't start with ourselves. We have to look at ourselves in the mirror so that we see where we lie in the modern colonial divide. Don't think when we talk about Western modernity and what have you, we are talking about Europeans and the like. Many of us, you and me, are deeply, Westernized, given the systems of education that we went through. And it is that in us that we need to deal with. Because I will tell you, this whole idea of the man or woman in the mirror is important for me in the sense that I know and I have friends and colleagues that I have quarreled with that tell their children not to speak the home language. They force them to speak, they want them to speak English only. And that is how deep coloniality is, because it has gone right inside us. So this is the intimate enemy, the enemy in us. So we need to start by decolonizing ourselves. Remember Ngugi's idea of decolonizing the mind. We need to start with ourselves, because if you don't promote your own languages, your own cultures, in your own homes, when students go to school, obviously, the school system is westernized. The school system is like a prison system and nothing else, because that is what it teaches, just to obey, just to do anything else. And of course, to take away, your Africanness, to take away your memory and download into your hard disk European and Western memory. So let us download into the hard disk of our children, our languages, our cultures, our practices. And that is the starting point, because that is how we can do decolonization piece by piece, because some of us are deeply colonized. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of how far we have traveled, I think Prof has already alluded to that. But I think we must celebrate and say thank you, number one, to political decolonization, because that was the starting point. Obviously, going all the way with, the whole idea of Pan-Africanism and what, I don't want to go into those genealogies, but thank you to the political leadership that has brought us independence, that has brought us, freedom and what have you, because right now, this conversation would not be happening if we didn't have political independence and freedom. So that is the starting point. They fought their race, and I think they have brought us somewhere. And we need to carry from where they left, and including scholars and activists like Frantz Fanon, Amilcar Cabral, and the like. Those guys laid a solid foundation. Walter Rodney. So we don't want to say we have not done anything. This conversation, again, organized by CUT and many other universities around the globe, is what can be done. We are doing something. So conscientization is very, very important, because the problem with decoloniality is that people confuse it. They think it's a combative kind of scholarship. It's a revenge racism. It's cancel culture, and what it is not. It is trying to center who we are. But another very important thing for me is that if we need to promote our languages, our cultures, as modes of instruction and what have you, we seriously need all parties all parties to come to the party, if I can put it that way. We need political leadership. We need the government, our governments, to come to the party. Funding is very important, and I will tell you why. Afrikaans as a language developed through massive funding, through the landlords pouring money and the government and developing all the way from as a Dutch kitchen language all the way until it became a language of commerce and industry. So anyone who tells you or who tells me that, hey, we can't use Sesotho, we can't use Shona, we can't use isiZulu and what have you, it is not correct, because Afrikaans is the best example, according to Mahmoud Mamdani, of how to decolonize a language. So it is possible. So, but what do we need? We need funding. We need governments to come to the party so that we can develop our languages. And I don't know, I think if there's anything that I have missed to respond to, maybe you can remind me. But I think Prof tried to touch some of the issues. Let me leave it there so that we can entertain more comments, more discussion.
Thank you, Doc. I think both you, Prof Mashau and Prof Jacobs, are really hitting it on the dot. What CUT really is envisaging, and we're seeing that it's becoming more and more a topic of discussion. And our job as CGE is obviously to implement comprehensive internationalization. We found it fitting to discuss these two concepts together. Are there any more questions, colleagues, comments, points of clarification that we have? This is a very interesting topic. In the chat box, I'm reading from Stone. He's saying that we don't have African universities, we have universities in Africa. And the identity and the threading of university in Africa is taking a nice evolution where Prof Mashau and Dr. Mashingwa started saying that Africans need to come up with solutions and identifications of what we identify and how we want to address decolonization and Africanization. Can I pose a question while colleagues are gathering their thoughts? Dr. Mashingu and Professor Mashau, I've come to understand that there are different types of colonization, and when we start the process, we can not only decolonize the curriculum, but we also need to decolonize the mindset. And shockingly enough, decolonize the infrastructure so that our infrastructure in Africa is representative of our African heritage and culture. And you also touched on the preference of languaging and communication. With that said, when you look in your lens and think of the future, do you think that the African child that has just been born will be in a stage to say in the next 10 years or 20 years that they are taking active steps to truly decolonize, to Africanize, and they are truly internationalized? Either Prof Mashingu and Prof Mashau, we can just take on that and nibble on that.
This is very interesting. Dr. Mshoko was talking about decolonization of mind, the mindset. Where are we? And then what are we teaching our children? At the moment, is it African? Okay. We have taken our children out of township and rural schools to towns so that they become English. And then when you look at these children who speak English more than their mother tongue, and it's difficult for them to communicate with their grannies. So for me, from where I'm seated, I don't see any change at the moment, especially in this country. Also looking at the issue of language, like I said, I was saying that it's true. Okay, the Africans developed their language, and we are not developing our languages as Africans. And we are not looking at which common language can we say this is our language as South Africans because of our diversity. Then it reminds me one of my professor at Poch, then now the University of Northwest, who said, "You blacks are so clever. You read a question in English, you translate it to your mother tongue. You answer that question in your mother tongue and translate it in English. This shows cleverness. You either change your mother tongue or you develop your mother tongue." So at the moment, the indigenous languages, though there is policy from basic education, policy framework on language, these are not helping us at all because we are not talking our mother tongues and we will never develop this. Even though there is money to develop this, I don't think there will be people who are championing, like I'm saying, who wants to lead this particular course of decolonization, who wants to lead the development of languages, who wants to lead, because this needs people who are committed to change. I'll leave it to Dr. Mshonga. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Doc.
Yeah, thank you, Prof, for clearing the path for me, and I think you have said it all. I will just share a short story to answer this. In 2017, I happened to be in a primary school classroom in Maseru, the capital of Lesotho. And when I lost concentration, about what I was doing, I happened to find my eyes, fixed on a very beautifully hand-designed chart hanging by the wall. And that was a chart about primary colors: black, yellow, green, white, you name it. My heart nearly popped out when I read somewhere where it read, black represents death and mourning. White represents purity, virtue, and godliness. Honestly speaking, with this kind of curricula in the 21st century, what do you expect of the black child, of the African child? So we have a long way to go. Our children are rootless in this way. So it is very important. That's why I even said, I have colleagues and friends and many where they say, don't speak to my child in Sesotho. He doesn't understand Sesotho. Don't speak to my child in Ndebele. She doesn't understand Ndebele. Don't speak, only English. Only English. What exactly? And the Prof has nailed it to say, who is there to run with this baton stick? Because we need leaders to be in that terrain, to be in that frame, so that at least they can lead us. As he rightly said, money, funds could be there, but who is there to lead? And definitely we need, at the highest level, political leadership. Because without that, I don't think we are able. That's why you see, if you look at global coloniality and stuff, people were trying to do the best for their nations. Thomas Sankara, just look at how he was eliminated, and one can go around. So I think we need to deal with ourselves. That's why I talked about the man or woman in the mirror. If we have to start this race, let us start with our children. Remember, you and me, as I've already said, we are terribly colonized, we are terribly westernized. But we can do something to our kids because of planetary awakening now. We can really contribute something to our kids. And it is very easy because, as you know, when you try to bend a stick when it is still soft, it will follow your direction. When you try to bend it when it is very hard, it will simply break. So let's start there.
Wow. This is a lot to nibble on, and I think it has really set the tone well. Tomorrow we are continuing with this discussion, but looking at it from the core business of what a higher education institution is about, which is the curriculum and how these three concepts impact the curriculum. My normal suspect had a point. Vongai, is Vongai still on? Okay. Colleagues, it gives me very great pleasure to welcome the CUT Acting Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Alfred Ngowi. He is truly a man of his word. He said he would not miss the first day of our International Family Week series, and he is here despite of long meetings that he has had with his executives this morning right through to the afternoon. Allow me to quickly go through his bio and welcome him officially so that he can officially welcome us and pass on his antidotes and his vision of internationalization at CUT and how CUT sees itself in South Africa, Africa, and beyond. Colleagues, please help me welcome Professor Alfred Ngowi, who's our acting Vice Chancellor and Principal at the Central University of Technology, Free State. Professor Ngowi holds a bachelor degree in civil engineering from the University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, a master's in civil engineering, construction engineering management from Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden, a PhD in engineering from the University of Witwatersrand, South Africa. His research interests are multidisciplinary, and they include engineering, the built environment, human capital, sustainability, circular economy, and the future workplace. He has extensive record in human capacity development, having produced technicians and degree graduates, as well as supervising 21 master's students and PhD students. Some of the students have proceeded with their doctoral education at leading universities such as MIT, Princeton in the US, and Cambridge in the UK. He has published over 100 papers in journals, proceedings, and book chapters. He is the co-chief editor of a Journal of Construction in Developing Countries, JCDC, and an associate editor of the Journal of Built Environment and an asset manager, BEPAM, and a reviews editor of the Botswana Journal of Technology, BJT. Colleagues, it is a great honor for me and my team and CGE to welcome our Vice Chancellor and Principal and ask him to take the floor and speak to us. Professor Alfred Ngowi, over to you.
Thank you very much, I hope you hear me. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Colleagues, if you don't mind, let me switch off the camera because my connectivity is not so. Apologize for not being here from the beginning, but the little I've heard regarding decolonization of the mind, it gave me pleasure of remembering my youth when I read the book of Ngugi wa Thiong'o on decolonization of the mind. So it was a long time ago, but it's spot on of what the things which we are doing today. It gives me pleasure then to belatedly welcome our program keynote, Professor Liane Jacobs from University of Free State, Professor Jude Peter from Cape Peninsula University of Technology, Professor Takalani Samuel Mashau from University of Venda, Professor Zibani Maundeni from the University of Botswana, Dr. Munyaradzi Mushonga from the University of Free State, and our own Dr. Nzoaki Malebo. The second Family Week series webinar, which is themed Internationalization, Decolonization, and Africanization, this is the melting pot of higher education. The aim of the Family Week series is, through the lens of CUT, enhance CUT's of comprehensive internationalization. In the year 2022, the Family Week webinar aims at promoting purposeful dialogue on internationalization, decolonization, and Africanization. I've already just mentioned how excited I was when I heard the issue of decolonization of the mind, which I learned several years ago. CUT confidently believe an immense cultural experience contributes to the formation of a solid foundation and is critical to the development of life skills, which strengthen all internationalization endeavors linked to academic or extracurricular programs, and especially how it enhances our effectiveness and efficiency regarding the services that we render to our students and staff. As we have indicated, our comprehensive internationalization has a great focus on internationalization at home. We believe that despite the fact that we cannot take all our students for visits into other countries or into other cultures, but by mastering internationalization at home, we'll be able to expose our students, all our students, to the various cultures across the world. So initiatives such as the Family Week series helps create an enabling environment for CUT to achieve comprehensive internationalization objectives. First of all, our CUT digital transformation agenda, which we believe we can digitize everything we do. It means we can make it available to anybody across the world, coming from Australia to New Zealand, all the way to South America. The second, transforming the CUT campus into international campus. That we believe, again, that both physical presence by international staff and students at campus, together with our digital and visual presence across different platforms, will enable to raise CUT status as part of our international community. And then the third one is that enhancing a campus that fosters an institutional commitment to diversity, inclusion, and bridging cultural gaps. So we all believe that
Prof. Ngowi,
differences among humans starting from, but also the cultures, different nations, we believe. Refile, I'm here. Can you hear me? Refile, can you hear me?
Yes, Prof. I can hear you now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know where you left me. I talk about one digitization, CUT digital transformation. Did you hear that?
Yes, Prof. You are now at point 3 going on point 4.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm sorry for that. So enhancing a campus that fosters institutional commitment to diverse cultural gaps. And then number 4 is so that when our students, international students come here, they go back with rich experiences. Number 5 is growing the number of opportunities we play. Number 6 is providing mobility opportunities for staff mobility. Number 7 is managing current institutional academic collaboration and expanding on international cooperation. And then number 8, we need to explore funding opportunities to enhance CUT internationalization endeavors. And this starts from near home. We like to work closely with Botswana, for example, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and then we expand across Africa and finally all over the world. So we are hopeful at this Family Week series, we'll continue to grow and present debates and dialogues that enable a wider and deeper understanding of comprehensive internationalization. I hope that the program will be engaging, as I have already noticed, and thought-provoking. Once again, I welcome all of the participants, and collectively, we can form a community of practice on internationalization. I believe the discussions which we already have today and what we are going to have tomorrow, by the time we finish that, it will take us to next level. Refil, I'm sorry that my connectivity is not very well, but thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to address the colleagues.
Thank you, VC. You have said quite a lot, and I think we have tried to echo and represent the institution in that light. Colleagues, we have come to the end of day one. I hope to see colleagues again in day two. Allow me to quickly rush through the program for tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will have a panel dialogue on the role of innovative curriculum development with Africanization, decolonization, and internationalization as the catalysts of curriculum transformation. We will hear from our very own Dr. Malebu, who is the Senior Director at the Center for Innovative Learning and Teaching, Professor Judy Peter, who is the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships at the CPUT, and Professor Zibani Mudaweni, who is from University of Botswana, our very long partner from the Department of Political Administrative Studies. Our program tomorrow will start at 10 and then end off at 12:05. Colleagues, I have the honor of doing the wrap-up and closure. And I have taken quite a lot of takeaways in my lunchbox. And yes, Dr. Mshunga, I am going to look at the man or the woman in the mirror and really look at what are my sentiments and what is my takeaway and my interpretation of decolonization, Africanization, and internationalization, and how I carry that through to the younger generation so that we can truly see a truly Africanized Africa at the end of the day, echoing the words of His Honorable Kwame Nkrumah. I also take away that we spoke about the validity of knowledge, what Eurocentrism says our knowledge systems are, and how we as Africans identify as valid knowledge, and how that then impacts on the decolonization. Prof. Masheu also touched on how decolonization cannot be a once-off approach, but it needs to be systematic in nature, and that we need to find one willing institution that would want to push the dialogue and the formalization of policy on decolonization and Africanization, as was the same initiative for internationalization. I've also taken away that we identify that we have ecological crises, capitalist crises, systematic crises, and how we have seen through the different movements of student movements, such as the Fees Must Fall, the responses to epistemological responses and feedback that we are getting, that there is an understanding of the nuances of the concepts and how we can start interpreting them and demystifying their contexts. I also have noted that you have heavily said on the crisis that plagues African universities and the African culture, and made reference to how Afrikaans is a model way to see how decolonization can be implemented and practiced. With that, colleagues, allow me to leave you with one quotation that I think will assist us in summating our webinar series for today and help set the tone for tomorrow, when we are really going to speak about how the curriculum, which is the core business of higher education, is impacted by these three concepts. It is a quotation by Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India in the 1950s, and he had this to say: whatever education a university or institution of higher learning imparts, it must achieve the global level of benchmarking given the vastness and diversity of the global village we live in today. I think today our three speakers, our keynote, our panelists touched on how diverse the higher education spectrum is, but also how inclusive it needs to be, and how we are building colleagues and students and graduates that can function in the global village that we live in. And that is where internationalization comes in trying to create and promoting actively the global citizenry that we need to become and push for. Colleagues, we are little over time. It gives me, again, it has been a pleasure to program direct today. We will touch base again tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, finishing at 12 o'clock. And we are hoping that this would be the last virtual family week that we're having, but moving on in 2023, we will start looking on at hybrids as we are still embracing digital transformation as one of our key priorities and objectives at CUT and at CGE. Colleagues, with all that said, I quickly want to look at the comment box. Professor, Dr. Mashui says, well, okay, our comments are interesting. And then Dr. Malebu at CUT says, one day we need to have a conversation on how Christianity was used to drive the colonial project. Wow, Dr. Malebu, we can add that as a thematic to our family week next year and have it as a discussion. But I also want to park that point, and we will bring it up tomorrow when we speak about the impact of Africanization, decolonization, and internationalization to the curriculum, because Christianity also played a role in the narrative of how curriculum development takes place. There is another interest, a response from Professor Dr. Mashinga, that you are spot on. Christianity was the biggest weapon, and we need to have an engagement on this. So I'm going to park this, postpone it, let it marinate. Tomorrow, I'm going to bring up this question and comment again tomorrow after we have heard from our three colleagues on the impact of curriculum and how curriculum is impacted by the three concepts. Colleagues, without wasting any time, thank you. Thank you to our Vice Chancellor for joining us. Thank you for our DVC for joining us. Thank you to our keynote address for joining us and sharing such knowledge. Thank you to our panelists for the wealth of knowledge and the challenge. Colleagues, when we go home, let's go look in the mirror and see what is our role in demystifying internationalization, decolonization, and Africanization as melting pots of higher education, as it is the space that we are occupying at the moment. Colleagues, in my mother tongue, I'm showing that I'm decolonized. We say in Setswana, "Ga in neboroko, pula ga ine." See you tomorrow. Thank you so much. We will see you tomorrow again. Goodbye.
And design programs. In 2004, with the restructuring of the higher education landscape, CUT embraced its new status as a University of Technology. Now, with student headcount of over 19,000 in 4 faculties, namely Engineering and Information Technology, Humanities, Management Sciences, and Health and Environmental Sciences, the university continues to make a positive contribution to the social and technological innovation outcomes in the Central region. CUT's diverse student community is also a true reflection of the region's demographic. The CUT is the only university in Central South Africa to offer programs such as engineering, radiography, clinical and biomedical technology, hospitality, and tourism management. Since 1990, nearly 53,000 students have been kept at this leading facility. During 2014 and 2015, the Department of Electrical, Electronic and Computer Engineering introduced the Higher Certificate in Renewable Energy Technologies, and a National Diploma in Sustainable Energy. CUT's research and innovation leadership in many areas, especially 3D printing, is world-class. The Center for Rapid Prototyping and Manufacturing is a world-class facility. In 2016, CUT was the first institution in Africa and amongst only a few in the world to receive the International Organization for Standardization certification for design and manufacture of medical devices. 38 years of academic excellence ensures students are in good hands when studying at CUT. The Idea Generator Center offers a development hub where students, staff, and even the public can develop their innovative ideas and projects. The Central University of Technology Free State's history, from its humble beginnings to the proud institution it is today, is reflected in its buildings. CUT has invested about 600 million rand in various key facilities for students and staff through funding from the Department of Higher Education and Training and Council as their contributions towards this investment. Both our campuses house a full array of modern, state-of-the-art library information services, well-equipped laboratories and lecturing venues, student cafeterias, extended computer hours, 24-hour security, vibrant student centers with a variety of student activities and services. The first phase of the university's infrastructure project brought about 6 beautiful and state-of-the-art buildings, 2 of which are on the Welkom campus. On the Bloemfontein campus, the Yarona building houses the Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics or STEM Academy and the Faculty of Engineering and Information Technology. The Ellen Kuzwayo building is a 3-story high building housing lecturing halls, labs and offices of the Faculty of Health and Environmental Sciences. The Tatai Song and Kopanong buildings are home to the Faculty of Humanities. These buildings enabled the expansion of the teacher education programs to increase teacher training programs in science, engineering, technology, and mathematics. The Tutong building on the Welkom campus consists of computer science labs with lecturing rooms, study labs, and micro-lesson classrooms. The Mangaliso Robert Sobukwe building houses communications and information technology. It has computer labs, lecture rooms and offices with a recording studio. Student residences Unity, Ikayaletu, Maya Angelou, Protea East and West, as well as Maipatu Mokatsane were built to the tune of 73.4 million rand. At the Bloemfontein campus, student residences worth 43.7 million were also constructed. Other new and renovated buildings include the Dirkutse extension, which now boasts upgraded labs, including new radiology labs, as well as a new beauty salon for somatology. In Bloemfontein, the Eendracht and Mannheim residences received a makeover, and students can now also enjoy upgraded vending gazebos, cafeteria, and food zone, 24-hour study areas in the library, as well as new PC labs. The hotel school's entrance area, bar area, and restaurant have also received an upgrade, along with the bathrooms at the Boetroski Hall. Furthermore, the CUT's Bloemfontein campus also boasts new teacher education and engineering buildings with further refurbishment of the e-learning, humanitas, art, engineering technology, and teacher education buildings.